Very warm welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another Sunday edition of the Daily Debate here on Nile TV International. I'm your host for tonight, Nancy Sarah Barakat. And tonight we're going to be discussing the new cabinet which was sworn in yesterday by President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. The new cabinet, headed by Prime Minister Sharif Ismail, includes 16 new ministers out of a total of 33. The Defence, Foreign and Justice Ministers all kept their jobs, as did most economy-related ministers such as Planning and Supplies. The Ministers of Health and Population were merged, as well as the Ministries of Technical Education and Education and Scientific Research and Higher Education. Now, Prime Minister Ismail appointed new ministers of tourism, agriculture, local development, transportation, international cooperation, culture, communication and information technology, as well as a number of other ministers. Meanwhile, 2 women are among the 16 new ministers. A former diplomat, Nabila Makram Abeid, was sworn in as the Minister of Immigration and Egyptian Expatriates Affairs, while Hassan Nassar was sworn in as Minister of International Cooperation. The new government is expected to last at least 2 months, when a new government will be formed following parliamentary elections. Just what do our guests think of the new lineup? What will the main challenges facing this government be? And will they be realistically able to achieve much during the next 2 to 3 months? That's what we're going to be asking our guests later on in the programme. But as usual, there are other topics making headlines that we like to shed light on. And today we're going to be starting off with Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukri's visit to New York to participate in the 70th UN General Assembly session. Shoukri is also preparing for the participation of President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, who will head Egypt's delegation in the high-level meetings. Egypt is expected to participate in a couple of meetings, including one for foreign ministers. According to the Foreign Ministry spokesperson, Ahmed Abu Zaid, Egypt will participate in the meetings in order to share its ideas and priorities on the topics that are raised. The annual general debate will begin at the UN headquarters on the 28th of September. Member states will gather ahead of that from the 25th to the 27th of September for the Sustainable Development Summit. And to tell us more, I'm being joined now over the phone by Ambassador Hagar Al-Islambuli, former assistant for... Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Sarah.
Ambassador Hagar, let me start off by asking you, what do you think are going to be the main topics raised at these UN summits?
Well, this is the Parliament of the world, so the agenda of the UN General Assembly usually covers all topics that are of an immediate, that needs an immediate look from the whole world. In our case, this session will be covering areas such as terrorism in the Middle East, some other political issues like the Palestinian issue and what's going on in the occupied Palestine, especially in the Mosque of Al-Aqsa. Also, on the other side, there are other topics that covers politics, economics, and social affairs all around the world. This session of the General Assembly will also have elections for the membership of the Security Council, in which Egypt is a candidate for the seat of Africa. So there is a huge
array of topics to be discussed.
For discussions that will be covered.
Indeed. But to what extent do you think the refugee crisis will top the agenda of this session? And what do you think Egypt can bring to the table with regards to this particular topic?
Well, Egypt is coming to the table with a situation, with a precarious situation in the Middle East.
Right.
With the terrorist wave that's crossing the whole of the Middle East,
right,
as well as the permanent problem of the Palestinian problem between the Israelis and Palestine. And I guess this is the time now to come to a solution that has been endorsed by different or several UN resolutions covering this issue.
You saying that, do you think there are concrete decisions being made with regards, for example, to the Middle East and the Al-Aqsa Mosque crisis in particular?
Well, I guess this will top the political agenda because the situation is deteriorating in the Aqsa Mosque, and this cannot be accepted by the Arab and Muslim world. This cannot go on forever. And I guess we have a call from different Arab leaders, such as the King of Saudi Arabia, calling for a session for Security Council to discuss the matter. The Palestinian problem has been leading the political agenda, the global political agenda, for a long time.
Indeed.
Now we have to come to a solution to the long-lasting problem of Palestine. The other important issue is terrorism in the region. That's crossing the borders from one country to the other.
Right.
It's the problems facing the region because of political positions taken by, or political decisions taken by different countries, either at the regional level or at the global level. So it is an issue which is very important, that has to be tackled. And I think Egypt has a history facing terrorist waves in Egypt, and have been successful for a long time. We've been facing terrorism, which is a global problem. It's not an Egyptian one, but we have to do our job in our country.
I thank you very much, Ambassador Hagar al-Islambuli, former Assistant Foreign Minister, for your time. And our second top story takes us to Saudi Arabia, which has deployed 100,000 security personnel to oversee the annual Hajj pilgrimage, which begins on Tuesday, according to the Interior Ministry spokesman, who also said and underscored that both the massive arrangements needed to secure one of the largest pilgrimages in the world and the multitude of threats that face Hajj. Major General Mansour al-Turki said the Interior Ministry concentrates on Hajj, considering that a threat might exist. Members of an elite counter-terrorism unit, traffic police and emergency civil defense personnel are among those deployed to help with crowd control and safety. They are supported by additional troops from the army and National Guard. Roughly 3 million people from around the world are expected to converge at the Kaaba in Mina and other nearby areas for the Hajj, which lasts about 5 days. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's all the top stories I have for you for today. But let's take a quick break with the first report we have for you for this evening, and a quick look at the new cabinet lineup, which is headed by Prime Minister Sharif Ismail. We'll be taking a look at that and then welcoming my guests here in the studio. Do stay tuned.
Prime Minister Sharif Ismail took oath on Saturday before President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. The Ministries of Health and Population have been merged in one. The Ministries of Technical Education and Education have been merged in one. The Ministries of Scientific Research and Higher Education have been merged in one. Helmi Namnam was sworn in as Minister of Culture. Tariq Qabil was sworn in as Minister of Trade and Industry. Nabila Makram Abid was sworn in as Minister of Immigration and Egyptian Expatriates Affairs. Yasser Al-Qadi was sworn in as a Minister of Communications. Hassan Nassar was sworn in as a Minister of International Cooperation. Saad Giyushi was sworn in as Minister of Transport. Hassan Fayyad was sworn in as Minister of Agriculture. Ashraf Shihi was sworn in as Minister of Higher Education and Scientific Research. Ahmad Radi was sworn in as Minister of Health and Population. Gamal Surur was sworn in as Minister of Manpower. Tariq Al-Mullah was sworn in as Minister of Petroleum. El-Hilal Al-Shirbini was sworn in as Minister of Education and Technical Education. Magdi Al-Agati was sworn in as Minister of Legal Affairs and House of Representatives. Mohammed Al-Assar was sworn in as Minister of Military Production. Ahmed Zaki Badri was sworn in as Minister of Local Production. Hisham Zazoua was sworn in as Minister of Tourism. The Ministers of Foreign Affairs, Interior, Justice and Defense in the outgoing government maintained their posts in the new lineup. Also on Saturday, Judge Nabil Ahmed Tawfiq Sadiq was sworn in by President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi as Egypt's new Prosecutor General for the next 4 years. The new top prosecutor, Judge Nabil Sadiq, had been recently appointed in July to head the technical office of the President of the Court of Cassation. Meanwhile, outgoing Prime Minister Ibrahim Mahlab was also appointed as Presidential Assistant for National and Strategic Projects. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi met with Mahlab on Saturday and praised on a number of big national projects in the last 2 years. El-Sisi commended Mahlab and his former cabinet's efforts during hard and critical times. President Sisi has instructed Sharif Ismail, the Minister of Petroleum in the outgoing cabinet of Ibrahim Mahlab, to form a new cabinet within a week. He noted that there is no immediate plan for governor's reshuffle. According to the Constitution, upon assembly of the Parliament, the President has to assign a Prime Minister to form a cabinet and present his program, and in the case that the Parliament turns down the cabinet, the majority coalition will have to nominate a Prime Minister to form a new cabinet that must gain the trust of the Parliament. If the Parliament does not approve the new cabinet, it will be considered dissolved.
President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, a year of challenges and achievements. Regaining Egypt's leading role regionally and internationally. New mega development projects. Upgrading Egypt's infrastructure. New Egypt, forward ever.
Welcome back, and let me welcome here in the studio Mr. Hassan Nassar, former Deputy Minister of Culture for International Relations. Thank you very much for coming in tonight.
Pleasure, as always.
Also joining me tonight is Dr. Freddy Elbaiady, President of the Egyptian Social Democratic Party in Qanubiyya and former Member of Parliament. Thank you very much for coming in.
You're welcome.
And let me start off with Mr. Hassan. Obviously, just first of all, your impressions of the cabinet lineup. And did any minister come as a surprise to yourself?
I usually do not like to judge things before we see it operation.
Okay.
And it just happened that possibly 4 or 5 of the new and old ministers are personal friends of mine. Either friends or colleagues. But it was obvious that there is an effort of morally assassinating the government before even saying the oath.
How so?
Fishing for tweets and Facebook posts, stereotyping people, some ladies as well as, I mean, the half sleeve and the mozza, and so there are a concerted scenario that really tries to downplay the government, and I'm very skeptical about who's behind it.
Right.
It seems that the 2 old regimes are playing the role, the revolutionaries are playing the role, so each of the factions has its own wish to downplay the government in order to embarrass the president. And this is the thing I do not like. I have a lot of reservations not about the ministers, but about the way they were chosen. It looks like the good old way. However, we should give them the time and the capacity to demonstrate their skill in order to get the things done in an 80-day or 90-day, a window. So this is my first reservation, or my first observation about what really happened. We should be understanding that this is a very short timed government that came after a lot of pitfalls, not criticizing Mahlib as an individual, but criticizing his own way of handling things. He lacked the strategic views, he lacked the synergy, he lacked the integration. Hence, we've seen a fragmented kind of government attitude of looking at things. A lot of decrees and laws were delayed. The parliamentary election was delayed. So there were a lot of shortfalls along the way. So getting or making a change of cabinet or a change of head of cabinet in that time, though the parliament is supposedly to be elected in December, does imply a meaning that we're heading for a parliamentary election. The parliament has the mandate to form a government. Hence, we should be having a different kind of government that pulls the whole thing together, get a grip about the issues, the street issues that is making people dissatisfied. So this is the mandate of the government. We should not really overkill the government with demands and stereotyping. So this is what I really did not like.
I'll touch on a couple of points that you made. Just right after I ask Dr. Freddy, again, your impressions perhaps of the new cabinet lineup, and did anyone come as a surprise? I
can't be surprised by the individuals, the ministers, because we didn't see their yet. But I'm actually surprised about two things. The first thing is the timing of change. It is a big surprise to have this time. When we were speaking of short-term government, we were expecting the parliamentary elections to start very soon, beginning of November. So we are speaking of like 80 days life of this government. So we are lacking actually data, and this left actually a lot of guessing and rumors. People are guessing why the previous cabinet were fired or changed. Some people started to speak about involvement with corruption with several ministers, and actually they spoke about the Prime Minister himself being involved in corruption. I cannot confirm or defend these rumors, but the lack of information and the lack of data and transparency left a big space for rumors and guessing. So this is a very strange timing for me to change a government. Either there is involvement with great mistakes or corruption, as some people are saying, and in this case people should actually be presented to justice, or they are not involved. So why didn't we keep them for 80 days? Because we're already having the feast is coming, happy feast for everybody. So it's after 2 weeks, there's no work in the coming 2 weeks, and then we'll start the parliamentary elections. Everyone in the government will be involved in the elections and will be observing and working to keep the parliamentary elections. So there is no actually a time to test this government in action, and I believe we will be actually killing them or giving them a very hard situation if we expect them to put plans or to work in 80 days. So the timing is a surprise for me. And the second thing is the way of choosing the minister, or the kind of ministers. The previous cabinet was actually a technocrat cabinet. We didn't have a political prime minister. The prime minister himself said, I'm not involved with politics, I don't like politics. And we changed it with another technocrat government. So there is no big change in the kind of ministers or of the prime minister. I believe that we need a politically involved government and prime minister. And it has been this way for years, actually. I believe since the 1952 revolution, we didn't have a real politician prime minister.
What are the pros and cons of that? I mean, some people say it's good that we have someone who's neutral, who's not affiliated to any party, but perhaps that's not necessarily a good thing. I mean, what are the pros and cons of having a technocrat as prime minister?
I believe that a prime minister or a government is politics. They are actually controlling the politics and the strategies. So I can't say that the prime minister of Egypt is not involved with politics or doesn't know about politics. So he's a politician. He's a politician in action. So he should actually have his assistants and his consultants, actually executive working and administrative workers. The previous government, we're not going to speak about it, but I believe that the previous prime minister was doing a hard work, but this is not the real work I would expect from a prime minister of Egypt. I would expect more long-term plans, more strategic work, but he was doing more micromanagement things, more administrative works that would actually should be delegated to less senior members of the cabinet. So my surprise about the kind of people they are choosing and the timing, and I believe that the one who has the decision is the president of the country. And the president, I don't doubt his vision or his reason, but we don't know it. And I believe that it would be much better if he would actually show it to the people or speak about it, why this change, why at this time, what is actually the assignments given to this government, especially that we don't have a parliament now. So the president is taking the decision by himself. In the absence of the parliament, I believe there must be more information given to the people. There must be, so you don't leave a chance or a space for guessing or rumors to be dealt with.
Okay, let me ask something. Let me ask you, Mr. Hassan, obviously a point that Dr. Freddy just brought up or raised, having a prime minister who does not have any political affiliations. What are your thoughts on that? What are the pros and cons of that? And do you think perhaps that having someone with who is more politically savvy, if you will, could actually change things up?
Well, the answer back is, do we have politicians?
Right.
I agree with the end result. Since 1952, the political life was a misery. But the end result is that we're having no politicians, with no offense. I mean, no wowish politicians. I mean, no politician who would really understand how the technocratic thing work. So he might be politicized, but he's totally absent about how to handle the nitty-gritties, the legwork. So, I mean, a technocratic approach is the right approach, at least for the coming 10 years. Until we fix the political life, we have parties that have popularity and have bases, and we have people who are really trained about how to handle government. Even the districts, the localities, we cannot handle it right. Hence, we were forced to get Ahmed Zaki Badr, right, to fix the district government. There are a lot of issues. We should not be expecting something to be fixed overnight. It would take at least a generation to fix the things that were corrupted, at least in the past 15 or 20 years. So my approach to that is that we have to have a technocratic government, because we're having the head of the state normally is kind of the political savvy. Right. And the president himself did not really belong to the political scene before January or before June. But he's showing that he really understands how to play the political game. He understands the strategies. He understands the international relations. maybe he's shying away from, I mean, exposing his vision forward, and I agree he has to spell it out. But at least if we consider what was achieved in a year, it is of a great magnitude. So he's playing the politics. We're having a parliament for the first time in history who has the right to form a government. He even has the right to annul the presidency if he doesn't like the way it was, I mean, handled. So let's wait for the parliament and let's see this, I mean, so-called we have politicians. Right. Because I assure you, maybe he's a good politician, but the general trend is that we're having no politicians who really understands how to handle government.
You both mentioned something, again, that I found very important, and that is that the way ministers are chosen continually is very much the same. We're choosing from the same circle of people, if you will. Does that define...
Not even a circle.
Does that...
usually...
Exactly. Well, I mean, we've got two ministers who have come back from holding the same positions, tourism and education, but then doesn't that defy the whole point of having a new government, which was intended, as we heard time and time again, to pump new blood?
But this is not the government. I mean, the parliamentary government should be like that.
So again, the question, why the change now?
When, well, there were a lot of kind of anger in the street that has to be fixed. But again, we're approaching a parliament, and the parliament will take a decision about which way to form a government. Will he concede to a chosen government by the president, or will he get politicians or a coalition of politicians?
What do you think? I mean, we spoke earlier about the formation of parliament. You said that there were fragmented coalitions, fragmented parties, perhaps nothing concrete. We won't be seeing a majority, and even as well with the individuals, you don't know their political, sways. Will that make it more? I mean, will it make it more difficult for them, to form a government, and will it perhaps also make this government stay in office for a longer period of time when it presents its program to it?
Well, if it performs well, then the parliament would find it very difficult to change it. So they will get at least some individuals in the formation of the new government. However, and I've said that here before so many times, I'm very skeptical about the formation of the parliament itself. So we'll be having an extremely mosaicish kind of parliament that has no core party to consolidate the opinion making or the law making inside the parliament. So even if the parliament would form supposedly a government, the government would be a kind of a mirror to the parliament. So we'll be having a big fiasco. But this short-term government is here to fix the issues at the street and to prepare for the parliamentary government, whichever way. However, coming back to the question, choosing a minister is usually asking for files from security departments, and it sometimes extends to calling people. Get me, do you know someone who would fit the job? And they send CVs. We have no institutionalization of choosing calibers, of choosing skills. We don't have a database. There is no database that consolidates all the skills in Egypt. And we will continue to lack that until we have another approach of looking at finding and elevating skills.
Right. Dr. Freddy, do you agree that we need a new way to pick ministers in the future, and perhaps the fact that we never see, I mean, we're always talking about younger people and in the younger generation winning in politics and perhaps being members of the not only parliament but of also government, but still we stick to a certain age group, a certain type of minister. over and over again.
Yeah,
How do you think we're going to break this cycle?
Before I agree with this, I have to disagree with something that Mr. Hassan mentioned about that he said that we don't have politicians that can be competent to be prime ministers. I disagree with this. I believe that we have politicians, but we didn't give them chances. We didn't try the...
Well, they have all the chance now. So
no,
seeing is believing. I haven't seen them.
Now they don't have that. They weren't given a chance to form a government, to form a cabinet. So we need to work on empowering the political parties, which I don't see actually this intention in the laws we are doing. So we need to work on empowering these political parties to have a chance for a political party one day to form a government.
But
I don't see this coming.
Interruption. If you wait for some government to empower the parties, then you're conceding to the end result that we're having no political life.
I'm not speaking about doing it today, but at least starting
Sure.
the first step. But I don't see this first step. I don't see in the coming parliament any political party will have a kind of majority, or any political coalition will have a majority to form a government. But as you mentioned, that it will be a fragments of different individuals or minorities who cannot actually have a political coalition or majority to form a government. So I don't see this coming in the near future, and I believe that we have to start working on
having a mosaic, as Mr. Hossein calls it, a mosaic sort of parliament with no real
It means powerless parliament.
Right.
If it is a mosaic of fragments, it means it's powerless. It means that they will not have the real power to speak or to form a coalition, to have rights to form a program or a plan, or to form a government. I believe we should start working on this. I don't see it coming in the coming parliament. I don't see it coming in the laws that will form the parliament after this, because we expect the coming parliament to issue the law for the parliament next to it.
Right.
So if this parliament is not coming actually from majority of political parties or backgrounds, they will not form a law to empower the political parties. So the people who are speaking now in the street that the political parties are weak and they don't have their impact in the street. I will agree with this. But I see if you have a weak person, you have one of two choices, either to kill him or to empower him. So I believe that we didn't work on empowering the weak political life, which has been actually weakened or dead for years.
How do you empower that? I mean, people would say that's a very vague...
There is.
No, it's not vague. We should empower it first by, for example, the elections law.
Right.
The elections law, I believe the former elections law, the last one, was much better than this one regarding empowering the political parties, by having the small electoral lists and having the open electoral lists, not the closed ones. This gives chances to parties to show in the parliament. How can you judge a political party? You can judge a political party. It's not actually an NGO to go and, as the Muslim Brotherhood used to do, by giving aids to people. This is not what a political party is meant to.
Right.
But a political party can be judged by one of two things. Either to form a government, and then you can judge how this government is working, or to have a number of representatives in the parliament, and you can judge how these people are functioning.
Right.
So these laws, are actually this law that we are going to elect upon, is not giving, it's not going to give a chance for political parties to be present in the coming parliament.
Okay.
So this is one of the things that it's not a vague thing, is the law, the laws that empower the presence of the parties, and then people can judge and can see which party is actually sticking to their programs, which party is actually showing good behavior in their through their representatives in the parliament, or if they have a chance to form a government, then you can have a judgment on this. We didn't have after the January Revolution or before this any chance for a party to be forming a government. Then we had few people from different parties who were represented in the cabinet, but the parties actually didn't form a government so that we can judge the program of the government.
Okay, well, gentlemen, if you'll allow me to take another quick break and a look at the meeting that was held between President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi and the newly appointed cabinet, and we'll be back to continue our discussion. Stay with us.
Fattah al-Sisi held a meeting on Saturday with the newly reshuffled cabinet after it was sworn in. During the meeting, President Sisi asserted the importance of implementing all assignments tasked to the new government, which includes achieving social justice, raising the people's level standards, keeping the Egyptian national security, as well as promoting Egypt's role on the Arab, African and international arena. For his part, the newly appointed Prime Minister Sharif Ismail revealed in a press conference following taking the oath that it was agreed with President Fattah al-Sisi that the government will provide a comprehensive program about its performance, its future and its vision for the next parliament to determine whether or not it will be replaced. Ismail said that the government is committed to completing the elections with integrity and transparency, explaining that the government has short-term and medium-term visions that depend on increasing the rates of development and security for citizens. He said the government requires real, comprehensive and fast development, noting that the government will confront corruption firmly as there is no place for it in Egypt. According to the appointed Prime Minister, the current government will also provide its best efforts as they have a clear mandate from the President to complete all national projects, such as the 1.5 million acres reclamation project, and to attract new investments. Ismail said the Egyptian economy is suffering, noting that they will fight to implement the objectives of reducing the state budget of deficit and debt and achieving better growth rates if possible. Prime Minister further said that the emerging gasoline shortage crisis has already been eliminated, noting that Egypt will receive a new gasification ship by the end of October, within Egypt's efforts to import gas and supply it to factories and power plants. He also added that Egypt will not give up its shares to the Nile water, as consultations on the Ethiopian Renaissance Dam are ongoing. Last week, Sisi accepted Mahlab's resignation and appointed the petroleum minister in Mahlab's cabinet, Sharif Ismail, as Egypt's new prime minister.
Welcome back. Mr. Hassan, let me come back to you. Now, obviously, the President had set a number of tasks for the new government, but do they have enough time? Do they have enough time to see these projects through, or these particular directives through? And is it realistic for us to expect much from them in this period of time?
Not much.
Right.
But at least the directives were very clear, and I mean, they could be achieved on a short term. I mean, the corruption, you could really do damage to corruption. Cleaning the streets does not really require a hero.
Right. Because I wanted to touch on corruption. It's a recurring theme. We're seeing it with every government. It continues to be an issue, and somehow, some way, it is not being tackled directly.
Because we have a legacy of corruption that is still there, and people, especially the oldest regime, was trying to pass a message that Sisi is the same as Mubarak and everything. I mean, we're coming back with the same baggage of corruption. So that has encouraged people to act corruptly. But fixing corruption is easy. I mean, especially after we have raised the salaries for the government employees. So no actually reason, I mean, to have a dirty hand.
Right.
And the control bodies, the security bodies, are playing a different role than it was played in Mubarak. Mubarak was actually sitting and sleeping on corruption, and he was asking when he feels that some figure has to be exposed, he would ask for his file and expose it.
Right.
Sisi is acting differently. He had a meeting with the security body that is responsible for corruption and say, I want you to expose by yourself without coming to me.
Right.
Don't wait for people to get extra corrupted. Expose them directly. So this is a paradigm shift in handling corruption and seeing, though it was very harsh, on everybody. Seeing a minister who was being caught in Tahrir Square was a message that corruption will not be allowed anymore. And it is a message for the business people who are trying to play under the table things.
Right.
So the message was loud and clear. It was very harsh, but it was loud and clear.
Will it make an impact? Will it make a difference, do you
It
think?
already made an impact.
Right.
It already made an impact. People are revising their of stepping back.
Right.
The old regime, I'm not saying the old regime figures. There are some very good figures. Ahmed Zaki Badri is an extremely uncorrupted and uncorruptible person. So there were extremely good figures in the old regime. But the old regime with the baggage is not coming back. So that was extremely clear. It's not going to happen again. So things of the sort could be really handled on the short term. But I just want to comment about, I'm not trying to create a debate, though it is a daily debate.
It's a daily debate.
Waiting for someone to empower you is like babysitting, right? And saying that the laws are responsible for having weak parties is actually confusing selling with the installation. We're confusing the channel with the message. If you're seeking empowerment, you have to empower yourself. And the grounds are leveled and the grounds are open. So you have all the capacities to really make damage in the positive sense to get the people in accord with what you're trying to say.
Again, I disagree with this. It's not asking for babysitting, but it's asking for environment to grow.
Right.
For the newly formed political parties and groups to grow, they need an environment, and this environment includes the laws, the media. When you see that the laws are actually restricting the abilities of the political parties to have their role in the elections, when you see that the media is attacking the political parties and day and night is saying that the political parties are doing nothing and they are not in the streets.
But they are
and
doing nothing.
No, what do you expect from political parties to do? People are expecting the political parties.
Nothing, but I'm just
actually,
facts.
the people who say that the parties are doing nothing, they are actually based on the former way that the National Democratic Party was operating on, or the Muslim Brotherhood were operating on, by operating social aids or serving the needs of the local people. This is not what a party is for. A party should put a plan. For example, when you are speaking of dealing with a health problem, people would expect from a party to go and build a hospital.
Right.
But a party shouldn't build a hospital. A party should put a plan for health insurance. A party should put a plan to reform the institution, the health institution. This is what the role of the party is.
Right.
And this is what the nation...
NDP is not there anymore. The Muslim Brotherhood is not there anymore.
That people were actually influenced by the way that the NDP and the Muslim Brotherhood were operating for almost 100 years ago.
Right.
So we need to change this.
Besides one particular law, do you think there are other things that parties are also responsible for not being strong enough?
Of course, it is part of the responsibility that lies on the parties. But I'm speaking about the other part.
Right.
But of course, the parties has to do work. They have to show their abilities, their capacities. You have capacities and abilities in the parties. You have people who can be in the government or form governments. And they need this. But they actually not every party who has a TV channel to show it or to
consolidate first. It's not acceptable to have 101 parties.
Not, and you cannot actually expect all the parties to have one coalition.
If we assume or if we predict that the upcoming parliament is going to be one that is very, I like your term, mosaic-ish, do you think that when it comes to taking concrete decisions, if they do find it difficult to reach a consensus, that will encourage all to form or to be part of existing parties, because it cannot work with so many fragmented ideas and so many...
I don't see actually, I'm not very much optimistic about the coming parliament or the operation of the coming parliament.
That's what I'm saying.
So I don't see this would be actually encouraging to parties. And again, I would say it's back to the way the laws were designed to form the coming parliament, the way the electoral lists were designed and the way they were elected and who elected the electoral lists and who empowered certain electoral lists. It's all designed in a way to form a powerless parliament.
Okay.
So I don't put much hope in the coming parliament. But again, I say that we have to start empowering the political parties. You cannot be speaking about political life without political parties. Though I agree that there are some weaknesses, there are some responsibilities that the political parties has to do from their part, but they have to find a good environment to grow and to show the capacities and the abilities and the programs they have.
Okay, I've got a couple of minutes left, but you wanted, Dr. Freddy, to mention a little bit about the merger of certain ministries. If we go back to that, what are your thoughts on that?
I was actually surprised about the merge of certain ministries. When we had in the former government, for the former cabinet, we had a separate ministry, for example, for the vocational teaching. This was actually a very good step. We need to work on this in a country where we have many people who work in this part, and they need more training, and they go and they travel and they need to be more trained and more educated. And now we see them back again. They are merged to the Ministry of Education. This was disappointing to me. Also the Ministry of Population, it's now merged with the Ministry of Health. They are keeping going it back and forth from being with the Ministry of Health and being separated. I think the former minister started to do a good job. So again, I was disappointed about the merge of the Ministry of Health and Population. I don't find a big problem with joining the research with the higher education. But the other two merges were actually, I hope that they wouldn't merge them. Right. I will also comment about the timing for the coming government. I think it's not realistic to expect seeing any results or judging the coming government in the coming 80 days. The only task that they can be judged upon is running the parliamentary elections, right. And which is going to be a little difficult with the laws and the way it's formed. So if they succeeded in running the parliamentary elections, it will be a step of success to them. Right. But I can't put more hopes, or I can't see that we can judge this government in the coming 80 days.
All right, Mr. Hassan, should the government make its program known? I mean, they said we have a short and a long-term vision, but nothing really concrete.
Even if they're here for 10 days, they have to make it.
Yeah, sure.
Right.
But vocational training or vocational education is extremely important. I don't like having it back to the Ministry of Education. However, I don't like having it as a separate entity. Vocational training, we have to look for specialization. If we are looking for labor at manufacturing, then we have to have the polytechniques or the faculties of graduating laborers belonging to the Ministry of Industry. If we're looking for people to work in the construction and real estate sector, then their schools have to fall back to the Ministry of Housing and Development, right. And so forth. Hence, we're tying the needs of the market to the graduates, right. And I think this is the best way to handle vocational education. And without vocational education, Egypt has no future.
A new ministry was formed, the Ministry of State for Migration and Egyptian Affairs Abroad. What did you think of having that ministry?
Right. It was about time, because we're having, a huge outflux. There is living 6 or 7 million Egyptians are living abroad in the Arab countries, in Canada, America, Australia, and even in Europe. And they are having the right to vote, even for the parliamentary election. Hence, they are part of the whole populace. Addressing them, accommodating them, integrating them with the development of a new Egypt is actually a good step, and it was about time to have.
I agree with all what's needed for the immigrants, but I don't believe that they need a special ministry for this job. Right. I think this can be also addressed by our embassies, by our foreign ministry. I don't believe that we need a special ministry to help our immigrants in this.
It doesn't work.
Yeah.
You have to have a body to integrate from within.
We had before this experience, but I couldn't see it actually helping the immigrants or the Egyptians abroad.
It was Ministry of Labor and Immigration, so it was.
Okay, so we'll give the ministry a chance to see what it can do. I guess my final question is, if Dr. Freddy, if you could give a piece of advice to the new cabinet, or perhaps tell them, don't follow your predecessor in doing so and so, what would you tell them?
Of course, the only advice I have to give them is to use the short time to work on as if they are staying for a long time. But I can't judge them. I can't ask them for long-term plans in 80 days or long-term visions to start on. They will be changed in 80 days, but they should keep working and meet the daily problems and deal with till the end of the parliamentary elections.
Mr. Hassan?
Don't listen to Facebook or Twitter.
All right, I think that's good enough advice. Thank you very much, Mr. Hassan Nassar, former Deputy Minister of Culture for International Relations. It was a pleasure, and it was also a pleasure having you with us. Dr. Freddy Elbaiady, President of the Egyptian Social Democratic Party in Maqayubiyya and former Member of Parliament. Thank you very much, gentlemen and ladies and gentlemen. That's all the time we have for this edition of the Daily Debate. You can find us coming your way again tomorrow with a new topic here on the Daily Debate. I'm Nancy Sarah Barakat, signing off.
Welcome back. A look at the South's top stories. Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry left on Sunday to New York to participate in the 70th session of the UN General Assembly. The Foreign Minister is expected to prepare for President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi's visit to New York, during which he will head Egypt's delegation to the meetings of the UN General Assembly. Foreign Ministry spokesman Councillor Ahmed Abu Zaid said that the UN session will tackle a number of files, including security and terrorism in the Middle East. The meeting of the General Assembly starts on September 28th and continues until October 5th. Israeli police said Sunday they had arrested 39 Palestinians in the West Bank and East Jerusalem after days of protests and clashes over the Flashpoint Al-Aqsa Mosque compound. Palestinians clashed Friday with Israeli security forces in Jerusalem and several cities in the occupied West Bank in a day of rage to protest an increase in Jewish visitors to Islam's third holiest site. Police said they had arrested 12 Palestinians in the West Bank and 27 in annexed East Jerusalem over the previous 2 days. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Wednesday vowed war on stone throwers with tougher penalties and new rules for security forces on when to open fire. On Sunday, calm had returned to the Aqsa compound with 350 tourists and 150 Jews visiting the site. Warring parties in Syria agreed local ceasefires in 2 villages in northwestern Syria and a town near the Lebanese border on Sunday. It marks the 3rd local ceasefire agreement in those areas since August and follows a renewed offensive by insurgents against the 2 villages, Al-Fawa and Kafraya, since Friday. Both previous ceasefires collapsed. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights reported that the ceasefire had come into effect. However, it did not say how long it was due to last. No clashes were reported after the ceasefire came into force. Meanwhile, rebels said the rebel-held town of Madaya, next to Zabadani, which is also included in the ceasefire and where thousands of civilians have taken shelter, had witnessed heavy shelling overnight by the army in apparent retaliation against the offensive on the two villages. Al-Fowa and Kifraya represent the two last pockets of Syrian government influence in the northwestern province of Idlib, though it is being defended by irregular militia rather than the army. Burkina Faso held its breath Sunday for a solution to the crisis triggered by this week's coup, after African mediators promised an announcement of good news. Though the mediators led by Senegal's Macky Sall said they would make the announcement early Sunday, talks at a hotel in the capital showed no signs of wrapping up as they entered their third day. Thomas Yayi, Benin's president, said Saturday that all the actors in the crisis would announce good news, hinting at a return to power of an interim government. This ends our top stories. I'm Mona Sweden. Thanks for watching.